Amidst the vast open plains, a heartbreaking scene unfolded. A wounded Mustang lay in the dust, barely able to move. But she wasn't alone. By her side, her tiny foal stood firm, his small body trembling with fear yet his spirit unbroken. He nudged her gently, whinnying desperately, urging her to rise, but she couldn't. Time was slipping away, and danger lurked nearby. Would the mother survive? And if she didn't, what would become of the helpless foal? What happened next would shock everyone. The sun hung low over the endless prairie, casting golden light across the rolling landscape. The wind carried the distant sound of wild mustangs galloping freely, their hooves drumming against the earth in a rhythmic, untamed beat. But away from the herd, beneath the shadow of a lone dry-bark tree, lay a wounded mare. Beside her, refusing to leave, stood her foal. The young colt, barely a few weeks old, pressed himself against his mother's side, his delicate legs shaking. His soft brown coat was coated in dust, his wide dark eyes filled with fear. He nudged her repeatedly, urging her to get up. But she remained motionless, her chestnut coat slick with sweat, her breath ragged and uneven. A deep gash ran down her front leg, dried blood crusting around the wound. Her muscles trembled from exhaustion, her body too weak to rise. The foal let out a high-pitched whinny, stepping back just enough to nudge his mother's neck with his small muzzle.
Still, she didn't move.
He cried out again, his gaze darting toward the open plains where the herd had disappeared over the horizon. They had no choice but to leave. Yet he had stayed, because how could he abandon her? The mare flicked an ear, acknowledging her baby's presence, but she was too weak to do more. She had given everything to protect him, to keep running when danger came. But now she had fallen, and they were alone. The sun continued to sink lower. Night would come soon, bringing with it the unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. The foal lifted his head, ears twitching at every sound. He didn't know what to do, but he knew one thing: he wouldn't leave her. He pressed himself against her again, as if his warmth could bring her strength. His breath came in quick, nervous puffs, his tiny legs still trembling. Then, movement in the distance. His ears flicked toward the sound, his young heart pounding. Something, or someone, was approaching. A cloud of dust rose at the far edge of the plains. The foal froze, instinct screaming at him to be wary. A figure on horseback emerged through the shimmering heat of the fading daylight. A man. He rode cautiously, his sharp eyes scanning the land, his posture tense, as if searching for something important. Then he saw them. The man pulled his horse to a stop, his expression hardening as he took in the scene. The mare lying helplessly in the dirt, the foal standing guard beside her. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then, the foal let out a small, uncertain whinny, tilting his head in confusion. The man inhaled sharply, realization dawning. This baby wasn't lost, he was refusing to leave his mother. And if the man didn't act soon, neither of them would survive the night. The sight before him was heart-wrenching. A wounded mare, her battered body stretched out in the dry grass, barely breathing. Beside her, the tiny foal stood unwavering, his thin legs shaking, his dark eyes filled with silent pleading. The sun was nearly gone, casting long shadows over the plains. The wind had picked up, carrying the eerie whispers of the coming night. The temperature would soon plummet. And worse, predators would come. The man swung off his horse, his boots hitting the ground with a dull thud. Slowly, cautiously, he stepped forward, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. The foal stiffened, pressing closer to his mother, his nostrils flaring in warning. "Easy, little one," the man murmured, his deep voice calm despite the urgency gnawing at his chest. He knew better than to rush a wild horse, especially a foal still clinging to his mother for protection. The mare flicked an ear, but she was too weak to react. The man took another step closer, assessing her injuries. Her front leg was badly wounded, the deep gash surrounded by dried blood and dirt. It looked like she had fallen, maybe tripped in a prairie dog hole while running. Or worse, maybe something had chased her. His stomach twisted at the thought. Chased by what? His gaze shifted back to the foal, small, vulnerable, exhausted. If the mare couldn't stand, the little one was in greater danger than he realized. The foal let out a sharp whinny, his ears twitching anxiously as the man moved closer. He was terrified, but he didn't run. That's when the man knew, this foal wasn't just staying beside his mother because he needed her. He was trying to protect her. The realization made the man pause, his throat tightening. This tiny Mustang, barely a few weeks old, stood like a soldier, refusing to abandon his fallen mother. But the truth was brutal. She wouldn't last through the night without help. And if she didn't make it, what would happen to her foal? The man exhaled slowly. His decision was already made. He was getting them out of here. Now. The mare flicked an ear again as he knelt beside her, reaching for the wound on her front leg.
She didn't flinch, didn't try to move away. That was a bad sign.
She was too weak to fight him. The foal let out another distressed whinny, his tiny hooves shuffling in the dirt, clearly agitated. He pawed at the ground, his little body trembling, but his spirit unshaken. The man met the foal's eyes.
I know, buddy.
I know you're scared. Carefully, he pulled a small canteen from his belt and unscrewed the cap.
Water first.
Then he'd figure out how to move them. He poured a little onto his palm and extended it toward the mare's muzzle. At first, she didn't react. But after a few seconds, her nostrils twitched, and she slowly turned her head. Her cracked lips barely brushed against his skin as she took a few weak sips. The foal watched intently, his ears flicking forward, curiosity flickering through his fear.
See? The man murmured. It's okay.
He reached for his saddlebag, where he always kept emergency supplies. He hadn't expected to use them tonight. But life had a way of throwing the unexpected at him. His fingers brushed over a roll of clean bandages.
It wouldn't be much, but it was a start. Then, a sound in the distance.
The foal's ears shot straight up.
The man froze.
A low, guttural howl echoed across the open plains.
Coyotes. And they were close.
The foal let out a panicked cry, pressing himself against his mother.
The man's jaw clenched. Time was up.
If he didn't get them moving now, they wouldn't survive the night. The mare exhaled shakily, her ears flicking slightly as she struggled to stay upright. Her body swayed, exhaustion pulling at her limbs, but she didn't collapse.
Not yet.
The foal let out another desperate whinny, his tiny muzzle pressing against her neck as if willing her to keep going. The man steadied her with a firm but gentle hand, his voice calm but urgent. You're almost there, girl. Just a little further. The distant glow of the ranch lights flickered through the darkened plains, a beacon of hope that pushed him forward. His gelding stood patiently nearby, sensing the tension, ears perked and nostrils flaring at the lingering scent of coyotes in the wind. The night was still dangerous, but they had made it this far. They just had to hold on a little longer. The mare let out a slow, trembling breath and shifted her weight, taking an unsteady step forward. The foal matched her movement instantly, pressing close against her side, his small legs quivering beneath him. The man didn't dare rush them. Instead, he reached for the lead rope again, giving it the gentlest of tugs, encouraging them forward at their own pace.
Step by step they moved.
Every few strides, the mare would falter, her injured leg barely supporting her weight, but she never stopped. Not with her foal beside her. Not with the man guiding her. The soft glow of the ranch lights grew brighter with each painstaking step, their salvation just within reach. Then, the mare stumbled again, harder this time. Her legs buckled, and she nearly went down, a sharp gasp escaping her as her knees hit the dirt. The foal whinnied frantically, circling her, his dark eyes filled with fear. The man moved fast, dropping to one knee beside her, hands on her shoulder, feeling the rapid rise and fall of her shallow breaths. Come on, girl, he murmured, brushing a hand along her sweat-dampened neck. You've come too far to give up now.
But she didn't move. She was spent. The man's chest tightened.
He couldn't carry her, and the foal wouldn't leave her side. If they stopped now, out here in the open, the cold night would claim her before dawn. His mind raced.
Think. Then, an idea struck him.
He turned toward his horse and quickly unbuckled his lasso, looping it into a makeshift sling. He worked fast, securing it around the mare's body, careful not to put pressure on her wound. His gelding, trained for hard ranch work, stood firm as he fastened the other end to the saddle horn. Easy now, he murmured, gripping the rope. With a steady pull, he gave the mare just enough support to help her regain her footing. She groaned but responded, her muscles trembling as she pushed herself up. The foal let out a sharp whinny, nudging her urgently as she finally stood once more. Relief rushed through the man, but they weren't safe yet. He mounted his horse in one swift motion, keeping the rope taut but gentle, offering the mare the support she needed to keep moving. The foal followed without hesitation, never straying from his mother's side. The final stretch to the ranch felt endless, but with the lasso guiding her, the mare pressed forward. The man could hear the faint rustling of movement in the distance. The coyotes hadn't gone far. But it didn't matter now. At long last, they reached the ranch gate. The man swung down from his horse, pushing the wooden gate open with one hand while keeping hold of the lead rope in the other. The mare hesitated, nostrils flaring as she took in the unfamiliar scent of safety, but the foal moved first, stepping forward without fear. Seeing her baby cross the threshold, the mare finally followed. The moment they stepped inside the corral, the man secured the gate behind them and let out a slow breath, his muscles aching with exhaustion.
He had done it.
They had made it. The mare, still weak but standing, let out a deep exhale, her body visibly relaxing for the first time since he had found them. The foal stayed close, his small frame pressing against her as if he still couldn't believe they were safe. The man ran a hand through his hair, shaking his head with quiet amazement. Then, stepping closer, he reached out and gently stroked the foal's muzzle. "You're a tough little thing," he murmured. The foal blinked up at him, ears twitching, his trust no longer clouded by fear. The man glanced at the mare, who stood tall despite her injuries, and knew she had fought harder than most. With time, with care, she would heal. They both would. For the first time that night, the man allowed himself a small, tired smile.
They were home.
Flicking toward him, she was listening, but she was fading fast. He knew he couldn't ask her to walk much further. There was only one choice left. The man turned to his horse, quickly undoing the saddle straps. If the mare couldn't walk, he would have to carry her. Lifting the heavy saddle from his horse's back, he set it aside in the grass, making room for the Mustang. Then carefully, he grabbed a rope from his saddlebag and looped it gently around the mare's chest. The foal snorted anxiously, his eyes wide as he watched the man work. The man met his gaze. "Trust me, kid." The mare didn't resist, she was too weak to fight back. He guided her forward, positioning her beside his horse, then looped another rope around her hindquarters. Finally, gripping both ropes tightly, he gave a command to his gelding. The strong ranch horse took a slow, powerful step forward, pulling the mare with him. At first, she resisted, her legs refusing to move. The foal whinnied frantically, pressing against her side.
Then, a single step. Then another.
The man exhaled sharply, relief rushing through him. It was working. She was moving. Slowly but surely, they continued toward the ranch, the mare leaning against his gelding for support, the foal trotting beside her. The man kept his pace steady, his breath visible in the freezing night air. They were going to make it. When they finally reached the ranch gates, the man didn't hesitate. He swung them open, leading the Mustangs straight to the barn. The foal paused at the entrance, his ears flicking uncertainly at the unfamiliar surroundings. The man knelt beside him, speaking softly.
"It's safe here."
The foal blinked, then pressed his nose against his mother's side, as if waiting for her approval. The mare, though weak, let out a slow, exhausted sigh. That was enough. The foal followed her inside. The man wasted no time. He grabbed fresh hay, a bucket of clean water, and a wool blanket to wrap around the mare's injured leg. She flinched slightly but didn't pull away. The foal stood beside her, his body finally beginning to relax. The man leaned against the stall door, watching them settle. They were safe now. But the real battle wasn't over. The mare still had a long road to recovery.
And the foal?
He had lost everything, except her. The man exhaled slowly, his hazel eyes softening. He had saved them. But somehow, they had saved him too. The barn was quiet, the only sound being the soft rustling of hay and the steady breathing of the Mustangs. The mare lay curled in a thick bed of straw, her wounded leg wrapped carefully in fresh bandages. She was weak, but she was alive. And for the first time in days, she could rest. The foal, however, refused to settle. He stood protectively over his mother, his small frame still trembling from exhaustion. His dark eyes flickered between the man and the exit, as if he wasn't sure whether to trust the safety of this place. The man watched from outside the stall, his arms resting on the wooden gate. He had seen horses like this before, wild, untouched, full of spirit. But this foal, he was different. His survival had been tied to one thing, his mother. And now that she had collapsed, now that she wasn't running anymore, he didn't know what to do. The man reached for a bucket of water and set it gently inside the stall. The foal's ears flicked toward the noise, but he didn't move. "You don't trust me yet," the man murmured, his voice low and steady. "That's all right. I wouldn't trust me either." The foal let out a quiet, unsure snort. The man took a slow step forward, careful not to startle him. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of apple. The foal's nostrils flared at the scent, his legs twitching, his body torn between curiosity and fear. The man extended his hand. "It's yours if you want it." For a long moment, the foal didn't move. Then, he took a step closer. The mare flicked an ear, watching through half-lidded, tired eyes. She wasn't strong enough to rise, but she was aware. She was listening. The foal hesitated, lowering his nose toward the apple, but at the last second he pulled back, turning to his mother instead. The man didn't push. He knew what was happening. The foal wasn't afraid of the apple. He was afraid of letting go. Everything in his life had changed so fast. One moment, he was running beside his mother. The next, She was on the ground, unable to move. And now they were here, in a barn with a stranger. The foal didn't want comfort from anyone but her. The man sighed softly, placing the apple on the ground. "It's yours when you're ready." He took a step back, giving them space.
For a while, nothing happened.
The foal just stood there, his sides rising and falling with uneven breaths. Then, slowly, he turned his head toward the apple. And for the first time since they had arrived, he took a bite. The man smiled faintly.
It was a start.
The night stretched on, the cold air pressing against the barn walls. The man sat on a hay bale near the stall, his hat tilted forward, watching as the foal finally curled up beside his mother.
He had a choice to make.
The mare was still weak. She had days, maybe weeks before she would be strong enough to return to the wild. The foal, on the other hand, he had imprinted on her.
If she left, he would follow.
And that was the risk. If they went back, would they survive? The man ran a hand down his face. He had seen Mustangs before. He had even saved a few. But this felt different. He wasn't just helping a horse. He was watching a bond stronger than anything he had ever seen. And the question remained, would he be the one to separate them? Or would he do something that went against everything he had planned? Would he let them stay? As he sat there, listening to the quiet breaths of the sleeping Mustangs, he realized he already knew the answer. He just wasn't ready to say it out loud. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon, casting a soft golden glow across the ranch. The man stood just outside the barn, leaning against the wooden fence, watching as the foal stirred from his sleep. His small body was curled tightly against his mother's side, his chest rising and falling in slow, steady breaths. The mare, though still weak, was awake. Her ears flicked as she listened to the quiet sounds of the morning, her dark eyes scanning the world outside the safety of the barn. The man exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. Today was the day. He had spent the last few nights thinking, debating with himself about what was right. Wild Mustangs belonged in the open plains, he knew that. He had never kept a Mustang before. But something about these two was different. They had survived against all odds. And in the end, they hadn't just found safety.
They had found a home.